All right, I see our participants filing in. Thanks everybody for joining us. We're going to give just another quick minute for people to join Perspectives webinar series, Raising the Bar. We got a good number of punctual people already joining the webinar. So if you want to head over to the chat, maybe let us know where you're from. And I know there's a big football game this weekend. I think I read something about that somewhere. If you want to share your rooting interests, we'd love to hear who you are cheering on for the big game, if that's something you're into. Oh boy, here it comes right out of the gate. Chiefs and a New Hampshire fan of the Chiefs. How about that? Avalanche, hockey time. This is so great. I'll lose track of time. I'll spend 10 minutes reading the chat. No, I won't allow that to happen. We're going to give just one more quick minute for people to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started. But I am loving the chat. Scottsdale, Arizona. Yeah, they were talking about Phoenix and how they're having the Waste Management Golf Tournament and the Super Bowl this weekend. Unbelievable. Eagles. Chiefs, Pittsburgh fan. Well, Pittsburgh person rooting for the Chiefs, or at least in Pittsburgh. Wow. All right. Well, I am anxious to get started with the webinar, so I'm going to say hello to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of Perspectives, Raising the Bar, How to Develop Leaders at Every Level. My name is Matt Pepsel. I'm the godfather of talent optimization, and it is my sincere pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelists today. I'm going to begin with Jo Washington. Jo is an executive coach and a strategic advisor to AceUp. She has more than 20 years of executive management and change management consulting experience across multiple industries around the globe. She is known for coaching leaders, teams, and individuals to break through performance constraints, achieve transformational outcomes, and sustain greater results. Jo, thanks so much for being with us today.
And thank you.
Next up, we have Heather Haas. Heather is the president of Advisa. She believes everyone deserves the opportunity to thrive at work. Her passion for fueling others' success drove her from her beginnings as a classroom teacher and a principal to her role as president of Advisa now. Advisa partners with organizations to create effective teams, leaders, and cultures, empowering them to be places where people love to work. Heather, it's so great to have you today.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be here.
And last but certainly not least, we have Eric Kirshner. Eric is a senior leader in the talent and L&D space. He's an experienced leader of leaders with experience leading operations teams in a variety of settings, including specialty and big box retail, specialty food and beverage, resorts, theme parks and entertainment, and business support. He drives organizational improvement through moving managers to leaders and working to drive the ongoing shift of building people-first workplaces. Eric, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you, Matt, and everybody else. It's a pleasure to be here.
I can't wait to hear from our panelists, but we're going to go on to talk a little bit about housekeeping before we get too far. And that is to say that the webinar is absolutely being recorded, and it will be emailed to you at the end of the session in case there's something that one of our panelists has said, you want to go back and watch that again, or if you want to share it with your coworkers, that would be amazing. I would encourage you to use the Q&A function in Zoom, as well as the chat. But if you want to make sure that your question that you pose throughout the day gets answered, please use the Q&A. That's where we collect those, and we'll be having some audience question and answer session for our panelists at the end. And you're going to want to stick around to the end, not only to learn about our panelists' contact information, get a preview of next month's webinar, but we've got some other fun bonus stuff for you as well. I'd like to begin with a way that we always do here on Perspectives. We really want to learn about your audience feedback on a couple different topics. And for that, we use our Menti poll. So Rachel has put inside the chat a direct link to a Menti poll. It's also on the screen. You can take a picture of it with your fancy phone if you've got one. And there's the code there as well. And we're going to start with, we have two questions for you today. First question is, who do you consider accountable for leadership development in your organization? I'll ask the panelists to kind of take a look as these answers start pouring in. We have a couple of options here. One is the CEO, president, owner. Maybe it all begins at the senior most leader. We have learning and HR, obviously our people leaders who train for this stuff. We have the line of business managers themselves. They're managers of managers, right? And then the individuals. It's just up to each individual person on their own. So what do you think, panelists? Any surprises by what you're seeing on the screen? Eric shaking his head no?
No surprises.
No,
no surprises. I don't know that I agree with the category that's getting all the votes, but not a
Yeah.
surprise. That's usually what people immediately think, is that learning in HR owns it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I think it's one, we kind of started this too, where we said accountable for it. And accountable is kind of a loaded term too, right? We know what that means. And a lot of times I think it's certainly more of a team effort than I made it seem. I was a little tricky there with the audience, but we do have one more quick question for you as well. I think if we're going to be able to put that up, otherwise, yep, here we go. All right. Our next question. How does your leadership capacity, meaning the current amount of leadership, your capabilities today, how does that relate to your strategy? So do you have enough capacity? Do you have too much? Maybe not too much, but let's see here. So we've got what we need to succeed. We have pockets of strong leadership, maybe not all across the board, wall to wall, but we have pockets. We'll need to grow our leaders if we want to win. And finally, significant gaps that could hurt us. Maybe there's some challenges that we have relative to leadership. Again, panelists, what do you think? Any surprises here?
No surprises here. I think this is almost straight on to any organization, big or small. This is what you'll see.
Yeah. You made me sad there, Eric. I agree with you. Unfortunately, that that's what almost I would say 60% or so saying that we have to grow our leaders at best, and we do have significant gaps that could hurt us. So, all right, I really thank so much to the audience for weighing in and helping us out with that. We're going to move on to the one slide that I have for you. It's a presentation that only has one slide. I can't believe it's such a thing. But I want to show you something that we found. And so every time we have perspectives, we like to put up the talent optimization framework and really talk about which aspect of the framework does today's topic really relate to. And in this case, because we're talking about leadership, it's really the entire thing, because we feel that talent optimization, although it's a new discipline, it tells us what every leader must do. No one gets to pass from business strategy all the way through to business results without doing it through people. And when it comes to being a leader, it tells us the 4 things that every leader must do. You have to design winning teams, hire top talent, inspire people to greatness, and diagnose the people problems affecting the business. So all of talent optimization is in play for today's session. One more slide, please. It shows us the example of Reuters, who had said that global CEOs are losing confidence in their leadership teams in the face of economic headwinds and all the change. You can see that in that headline, talking about at the very top, there's an issue. When you see this LinkedIn poll that PI put out, we said, how effective is your company's leadership development program? How effective is it? Unfortunately, the winning answer, what program? We don't even have a leadership development program. So the question for the panelists, not the question for the panelists, but what we're going to be talking about today, this is why it's so important. If we are seeing that global CEOs are saying we don't have enough capacity at the top, and we're seeing from leadership development from the bottom up, that's not working either. I am so glad there's so many people on this webinar today, because we have absolutely got to talk about leadership. So it's something I'm going to get us started with here when we talk about the panelist questions. It's clear nobody seems to think we have enough leadership at all inside these organizations. So it's not a new problem, though. So what I want to really start the panel off with today is, what are some of these forces that we feel are working against us? Let's understand the problem a little bit better when it comes to increasing our leadership ability. And Eric, maybe I'll ask you to get us started with this one.
Sure. Yeah, I think the largest, and from what I've seen in organizations that I work with, friends, people working in different companies, is really the largest thing we can do is take that mind shift of our folks focusing on managers and create leaders out of those managers. I used to use the analogy all the time that customers expect us to have a manager in a building, that person they can go and talk to. And that's why a lot of our roles are designed as manager roles. But when you're really talking about shifting the organization, it's really taking those managers in those positions and helping them define what leadership is, and really significantly bring that into your organization, no matter how big or small your organization is, to really start to move that needle. And I think that's the biggest way that we can start to increase leadership right away, is understanding our managers are our leaders. Whether they're leading or not is the question. And that's where you can start to dig in.
So mindset, historic mindset, that's something we got to overcome. Joe, I know you had something you want to weigh in on this one too.
Yeah, I really love the first slide that you put there, because it's really nuts to bolts when we talk about the business strategy, and all the elements in between before we even get to the business and people outcomes.
Mhm.
So I'm looking at this as not a little small C, but a big C in terms of the change. So the kinds of things that we've even measured, even in our brief start in our conversation here, has been about leadership development programs. Is it really a program? That has a start and an end. Or are we really talking about the leadership empowerment strategy for the organizations?
I like that a lot. Every leader's on a journey too, beginning and end.
Mhm.
Heather, what do you think? This is what's holding us back? What is historically, there's been a problem for a long time. What is it that's got us gummed up?
Well, I think one of the things that has emerged most recently, we're dealing with pretty seismic demographic shifts where you've got 10,000 boomers exiting the workforce every day. We've just rebounded from, the pandemic and hybrid work, and the whole work environment has been tossed about. And in the midst of all that, it's been challenging. That alone has made it very challenging to identify and prepare future leaders. So I think those demographic and sort of, global and cultural shifts that are going on are part of it. I also think, to the point that Joe made, leadership development isn't like this thing over here that's kind of separate from the core work of the business. We really have to move to a more strategic and systematic approach to this. It isn't about sending people to workshops or sending people to training. We've really got to see leader effectiveness as the core competency of every business, irrespective of what industry you're in. And when you see it that way, that it's really the nucleus of how things get done well and how we create a magnetic culture where the best and brightest want to be, now we can start to get the right resources in place and dedicate the right time to take a more strategic approach.
I love that too. And I love one of the things that my favorite things about talent optimization, it holds that we need leaders at every level, whether you're an individual contributor all the way up to the CEO. We saw from that Reuters example, you're a leader, you're having an opportunity to lead projects and tasks and yourself, even if you don't have any direct reports. And I love that idea of leadership effectiveness then also at every level. And Joe, I'll ask you, because as a coach, your perspective is really important to me. When we think about leadership development, it's a term. And as you said, it sounds like a program is very limited in time, but how do you define leadership development?
Let's start with managers. Managers motivate, leaders inspire. And for us to think that motivation and inspiration is the same, it's not. We motivate based on what our needs are. The manager really has to get a deliverable done on time at a certain level of quality. So he's going to hang out some carrots there to motivate those individuals or his team to make sure they deliver for him. Whereas Inspire, we're really talking about the inside. We're talking about the person and what really makes them tick. So we're starting to really think about it in terms of putting a fire in them versus a fire under them to motivate them. So that's how I think about leadership development, because those are my beliefs. So when I think about the meaning of leadership development, really, Matt, we're talking about empowerment of people, enabling them, observing them, giving them the resources, giving them the opportunity to practice, and then giving them some coaching to be inspired.
The chat is blowing up with support for that definition. And I'm feeling the heat from that fire that you're talking about under me in my heart, all these kinds of things. And I think one of the things that's really clear now, and I was thinking about Heather's comment too about generational differences. And now it seems that the newer entrants to the workforce really want that fire. They want to feel that, and they're more vocal about it certainly than prior generations. But with all of this focus on talent challenges, disruption, there's been a lot of focus about people problems. We call them people problems, which is all, you hear these things about quiet quitting and rage applying and all these terrible things. And I see this so much in the business press where we need to focus on some of the soft skills. We think about psychological safety and empathy and things that our leaders need, which I think is really important. But it begs the question for me, like what's actually happening in the real world? What I love about the panelists being on the call is like what's happening in the real world, not the press, when it comes to these soft things. And Eric, you're in the real world for sure. Tell me what you're seeing when it comes to this.
Yeah, absolutely. I love to talk about this because I think it's so true. No matter where you look, we're in an ever increasing dichotomous environment across the world, red versus blue, us versus them mentality, corporate versus privatization. No matter where you look, it's dichotomous, right? And it really has come into the workplace. And we're even talking about a minute ago, managers versus leaders, right? Everything is a dual choice. And I think ultimately the reality for me, when we really think about the people-centric areas that we want to be leading in, we have to recognize that I'm going to surprise a lot in this group when I say salary isn't always the right answer, and it's not always the solution, because you can salary to some point, but you can't create value and feeling heard by adding into salary or looking at salary. And I think a lot of folks, places where folks are really changing their rules, or excuse me, changing their roles, is they're looking for that place where they feel valued, they feel heard, they feel like they have a future with that organization. And you're seeing that more and more in the workplace, in those kind of areas where you're getting that quiet quitting, or that, they're looking for that safer space to work. It's because they want to feel heard and valued, not just the salary that they get every 2 weeks on their paycheck.
That's a great point. And I know we see some statistics where people would take a little bit less pay if they could get some of those other needs met. Heather, what are you seeing? Heather, you work with so many great clients of yours. What are you seeing out in I'll use my quote, the real world when it comes to soft skills, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I think, as an organization who's been focused on helping leaders develop and helping, talent be optimized for many years, it's really kind of affirming now that the issue of bringing soft skills to the forefront, if you will. I mean, I think organizations are realizing this isn't just nice to have anymore, that if we don't have leaders who know how to care about people and challenge and develop people and create safety, and if we don't have leaders who know how to do that, we're going to lose great talent. And if we don't have talent, we can't grow. So I think what's happened is all of this has always been in the background. Oh, if we have time and if we have money, we might send some people to some workshops or read a book or send them to leadership camp. Check the box. Well, what's happened now is the need for effective teams, leaders, and cultures is in the foreground. It's right here for CEOs. And I think CEOs and board members and owners and founders are saying, we have to get this right, or we can't compete and we can't win customers. So it's become more of a business imperative. And what we're seeing with our clients is they're hungry and eager and invested in making change, and even supporting their leaders very holistically and helping them get better at this. Because like I said, I think a lot of organizations have completely neglected true, leader effectiveness over time.
Yeah, it seems like the CEO poll and the Zoom poll definitely agree with you on that front. Joe, is a coach working with leaders all the time. Like, what are you seeing in terms of the?
I got a hankering that you were going to ask me that. And honestly, I actually, as Heather was talking, I was thinking of this one plant director who, as I came onto the campus to start working with them around leadership development, he said to me in his first remarks, I don't care what you do. We already fired 8 other consultants on training for leaders, and it just doesn't work. So go ahead and do whatever you're going to do, because I'm not really that interested, Joe. Well, that was a great invite for me to go and huddle with his superintendents as well as his on staff HR folk, and really put our people empowerment strategy together. When we did that, involved all of the superintendents, gave them the tools, did the observation, did the coaching. Of course, they turned things around. Now, this was a plant that was on target to close. by the end of the
Wow.
year because they were in the fourth quartile instead of the top #1 quartile in terms of profitability.
Wow.
Inside 1 year, these leaders turned the productivity straight up out of the ceiling, if you will, and the expenses reduced significantly. So they moved from the bottom quartile to the top quartile. You can imagine the phone call that I got from that plant director that said, I don't know what you did, but could you come over here and show us again?
I think it's
Oh,
actually,
yeah, but I think, Heather, like you're saying, they feel the need for it now, but they don't know how.
Right.
yeah.
Don't know how.
It's also true. I find that historically in more of the like heavy machinery and some of the more industrial industries, you start to feel like, well, I'm managing these machines and they're very rational. So my people, I'm just going to manage them a little bit more like machines, right? And there's a concern that as more and more artificial intelligence and technology has taken over processes that used to be the domain of white collar work or knowledge work, then there's the same risk that we can rationalize and control and treat people like machines almost. And now I'm so thankful, doggone it, for Gen Z coming into the workforce and showing us that that's not okay. Our levels of anxiety and mental health are not going to allow for this. Our demand for inclusivity and for, being heard is not going to, you have to treat us like people. And otherwise, I love Heather's point, you're not gonna be able to compete, right?
Yeah,
right. It's so refreshing. And it's just, it's almost like these two cloud fronts banging together a little bit of, it's fascinating to watch, but I'll move us forward a little bit. A lot of times when we talk about some of the key themes that come up, there's certain characteristics for leaders that are just evergreen, always important. And one is that we talk a lot about self-awareness. And so I want to ask the panel, like, how can we, everybody's on the call, you saw a lot of the L&D representation on the call. And let's say that we're in the mindset, we want to help our leaders develop self-awareness. Eric, what are some examples that you've found success with when it comes to raising that type of awareness among leaders?
Yeah, so I'm going to share in 20 seconds or less my career history right here, and really because it gets to the heart. And I think back to your poll early on where one of the smallest ones was I drive my leadership development, and I'm fully in that camp. Like that is where leadership development starts or dies, right? So for me, it's thinking about my career early on. I was promoted when I was 18 years old to a store manager, and I was taught how to check checklists, how to turn the lights on and off, hit the payroll button every Sunday, all those things I needed to do, and spent many years being a great store manager. And then I moved to a small company called Disney, and I worked with Disney for 10 years. And they threw my tool belt away and said, let's actually give you a new one. And this is your leadership tool belt. And I'll tell you, when I really started digging into that idea of leadership and really understanding what that was, I tossed my own tool belt away there and created a workbench. And it's now my leadership workbench. And it's what I really do, because not only is it about me helping, it's bringing people to my bench and teaching them how to also do the things that I'm doing each and every day. And that's that self-awareness that you need, that we recognize when we're just walking around with our own set of tools to get the job done, we're not actually solving the problem. If you think about building a house, a sports team, pick an analogy, one person can't do it all unless they're playing solitaire, but chances are they need someone to program the game, right?
Yeah, right.
So I think really that self-awareness starts with understanding you're not just working off a tool belt, you're at a bench, and that bench needs to have others come to you, and you need to invite people to join you as well. It's never a one-person sport.
That's so well said.
That.
Yeah, and Joe, I'll keep you going on with this one too, because again, in the coaching profession, a lot of awareness is something that people need in order to move forward in the coaching process. What are some of the specific tools that you use as a coach?
I think
when you're working
the specific tool I use is what I call the apply model. A standing for authentic self. So learning that, going to Eric's workbench to really get a more self-awareness around your authentic self as well as your purpose. But where I want to add to what Eric is saying about the workbench is that we need to do the second P, which is practice. So it's one thing to understand self, and there's a whole bunch of tools out there about personality and what your strengths are and all that good stuff. But if you don't understand or practice who you are authentically in certain, around your purpose, then what's your opportunity to learn, which is the L.
Mm.
Less known for you to grow, which is the Y. And it's all about development. If you talk about development, we're talking about growing, then yes, understand, but make certain that you practice, learn, and then grow. And that's what
Yeah.
the applied model is all about.
I like that. I like that a lot. Heather, self-awareness, you've been doing it a long time. What do you think?
For sure. I mean, of course, the predictive index behavioral assessment is a great tool for self-awareness. We also work a lot with emotional intelligence. But I think what I would add to the conversation, I mean, assessments can absolutely help in creating those moments for people to hold up a mirror and understand their strengths is terrific. But it's also very important, what is the environment that someone is going to go back into? So we like to use a metaphor, you know, you can wash the salt off the pickle, but if you put the pickle back in the brine, it's going to get, so we have to be, I think, very aware now more than ever before. It's not just about sending people to work with a coach. That's important, but that's only part of it. It's not just about bringing in predictive index and implementing it. That's important, but it's only part of it. We've got to take that more strategic and systematic approach to really understanding, what do effective leaders say and do around here? And once we get clear about that, now we can align our systems, our policies, our environment, make sure leaders at all levels are aligned, so that when we send people and give them tools and workbenches and even whole buildings full of access to great things, they have to be supported when they come back on the job, because we know that really only 10% of change happens from knowledge and skills. A workshop, an assessment. 20% of change happens through relationships, mentors help you make change over time. But 70% of the change happens with people at work, based on the environment. So are we putting the pickle back in the brine, so to speak? So at Advisa, we've really tried to work on those environmental pieces that surround self-awareness and good hiring and all of the other important talent management practices that exist within a company.
I think this is part of why it's so challenging to some people find it challenging to become leaders or to act as leaders, is because self-awareness, when you are in that leadership role, let's stitch together some of these pieces. We hear from Eric that it's a lot of learning and teaching others, right? And we hear from Joe that we've got to have this practice. And we hear from Heather that we've got this opportunity to create these conditions. As a leader, you have to be aware of yourself, like in your own tendencies, characteristics, potential pitfalls, whatever it might be, but you're also creating conditions for your team.
That's
Are
right.
you aware of the conditions you're creating for your team? In the case that Joe shared a little bit earlier of the plant manager, probably not connecting the dots on the conditions that that person was creating and that the team couldn't be at their best, right? In those conditions. That was some pickle briny stuff that I was hearing from Joe from that plant manager. And you're like, wait a second, hold on. This isn't how we're helping people grow. So I think there's layers of awareness even too. And
Totally.
one of my
We now need pickle jars with the PI logo on them.
Yeah.
All of our desks. So
Yeah.
I'll throw that out to you, L&D.
It's the pickle index. We'll come up with a whole new thing. It's going to be great.
I love it.
I love it. Well, I'll move on to another one I hear all the time. I hear about leaders who say the problem is lack of accountability. The people in the organization, they don't have accountability. How can we teach leaders to modify their leadership? It's the one thing they have their control over, right? How can we teach them to lead in a way that increases accountability? Eric, maybe can you get us started on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure the esteemed panelists will take it farther than I do here. But for me, I think there's two big, easy ways to look at this. Stop blaming for mistakes and start owning the challenges with solutions. And I think, every time when I work with my field partners, my corporate partners, folks all over the organization I'm with today, the first thing I always hear is, oh, well, it was this person's fault, or it was that team's fault, or it was this customer's fault. Now I got to fix it. And I'm like, okay, let's not worry about the fault, right? You don't have to worry about the blame. Let's talk about the challenge. And more importantly, let's dig into the potential solutions. Those solutions are going to drive how you move forward. And ultimately, that's the accountability. it's already happened. You've already had the injury, right? You've already had the issue. So let's talk about it for a second, understand that, but then really think about, as a leader, how do you then dive into the solutions for the challenges that were created? And that can move you from managing a checklist to leading the team. And that really is where I sit on it.
I like that. Institutionalizing accountability in that way.
Mhm.
Joe, it's got to be a topic for you too, Joe. You must be coaching.
Oh,
people.
yeah. Most of my coachees come in complaining about them.
Yeah.
And I always take their finger and say, move the thumb back to you. Because it's not about, I agree with Erica, it's not about the blame game. And it starts with you, that when we talk about leadership empowerment, and I love that everyone is saying it starts, even you as an individual contributor, you're there to lead. So this particular coachee was an engineer. So you can imagine the mindset he had around strategy. There's no strategy for the work that we're doing, and we're doing too much work. and I wish my leaders would do differently in terms of prioritizing the work and knowing that our work was going to impact the overall business. So of course I said, well, where's your strategy? Well, I don't have any tools for building a strategy. Well, let's give you some tools. Let's coach you up around that. And let's have you practice in putting your strategy on the table with your leaders. He did so. He did very nicely. In fact, the leader said, "Ooh, this is really good. Could I use this?" So of course, that built the confidence in the coachee and started to help him to understand, wow, I do have value and I can influence not only my leader, because he took it to his colleagues at his level, but I also can make a difference in the organization.
Wow.
So as I closed out with this particular coachee, his greatest takeaway was, whenever I get stuck again as to they are the problem and not me, I'm going to go and find the right tools to help me get unstuck. And I'm going to go and practice. I'm not going to be afraid any longer about putting those ideas out with others and socialize it to the point that we can get that kind of strategic alignment and then be able to move forward. I was so happy that I could let go and know that he had a strategy going forward as to whenever such a situation would occur again.
Yeah, it can literally be life-changing. And when you think about what a great example of leading by example. So now using tools and leading up, having the willingness to share that up. But same topic for you, accountability. We need it. How can we teach our leaders to lead in a way that they can get it?
Well, I think sometimes one of the barriers to accountability is actually a lack of clarity. So I think when people are crystal clear about goals and roles and where does my role begin and end, and what is my team's responsibility to the broader goals of the business. So I think sometimes a very practical place for leaders to start is to just simply have conversations with people. We call them line of sight conversations around how is what you're doing every day connecting to the broader goals of the business. And then also, I would say a very practical skill that we teach our leaders is to use what we call how might we questions. So let's shift from, like you were saying, Joe, we've got a problem, we've got a challenge. Let's stop worrying about the blame game so much. Let's be accountable to fix it. And so the how might we question is very subtle, but the phrasing of that, it builds trust and shared purpose with people, because it's not the leader stepping back and saying, how are you going to hit that number? Right. It's how might we, do things differently to achieve the growth that we're charged with achieving.
Excellent.
It accomplishes so much, just that one phrasing that you just used. It creates the safety, like how might we? We're just exploring here. So I've created this. It's okay to just come up with ideas that may not go. How might we? It's very creative in the sense of there's a future focus. It's very generative in terms of ideas. And the we is very affiliative, right? So now all of a sudden we got some belonging. We're in this together. versus why'd that happen? Ooh,
Yeah.
there's judgment. Holy cow. Now
Well,
I'm on
and
my heels.
sometimes I get pushback from leaders who say, yeah, that's all great, all that fuzzy stuff, but we still have to hit the number. You certainly, I mean, if you have a pattern of someone who consistently is not, everything's clear, we've collaborated, we've done the how might we, and we're still not getting where we need to go, well, that's a different issue. Then you've got to performance manage that. You've got to try to coach and remediate that potentially. But starting with a more collaborative and inclusive approach is certainly going to get you off on the best start.
Yeah, 100%. Have we done everything we can to create the conditions again, or are we dishing out a lot of pickle brine? I can't let go of the pickle brine. It's just too good. It's too
That's why I
good.
like it. It's a sticky metaphor there.
It's just too good. So
Yeah.
one of the things that we've talked a lot in the top about change, and the amount of change that we're processing, absorbing is just staggering, really, when you think about it, just unprecedented. What's happening now? What's the implications of having all of this change when it's coming and thinking specifically about leadership development? It was hard when things were changing less dramatically as they are now. What shot do we have at this point? Joe, what do you think? How can we handle leadership development in light of all this change?
Not separately. I'm thinking integratively with all of the OD methodologies and disciplines that we have in place today, probably on an ad hoc basis, but they're there. I'm thinking of business strategies. There's lots of offsite discussions around what will our strategy be for 2023. That needs to be folded in. Change management is a discipline also, is it not? Of assessing what needs to be changed in an organization, and who's going to be the champions of those changes, and what kind of training and communications we're going to put in place. All of those things are currently there, but are they integrated? And are they integrated in such a way that it's not only going to move the needle in terms of the business outcomes, but also move the needle in terms of our leaders and building up their capacity to support the new culture and the new environment that is so demanding. So I think it's for me, they don't stand alone. OD, change management, leadership development, all of that, but it's us leveraging our talents as well as our value to get those leaders who don't understand what we're talking about, but get them to really experience the integration of all of those disciplines.
I love that concept of integration. It really tries to break down some of the cautionary examples that Eric, that you provided around the dichotomous nature of some of what we do: sales or marketing, sales or engineering, sales or anybody, pretty much. Let's just be honest. But trying to find those commonalities, those integrated points is huge. Heather, your clients are seeing this too, all over the place. So much change. They're in a leadership capacity deficit based on the poll results. Like, what shot do we have?
Well, we have a tremendous opportunity, and one of the most important places to start, I think, is with core values. Because when you talk about how do you integrate disparate silos or bring people together in a unified way. So we do a lot of work helping leaders take the values off of the wall, or off of your website. We got to bring these to life, because your core values should be the pillars of your intentional culture. It's how you've defined your corporate character or your corporate DNA. So let's dig into those and really unpack them in behavioral terms. Then your leaders can be culture carriers. So not until we have a uniform understanding, what do these things mean? Why are they important? How do we live them out? How do we recruit to them? How do we coach to them? How do you coach someone to be more team-oriented if that's a core value? Or if continuous learning is a core value, how do we recognize examples across the organization of that? So when the values are clear and explicit and we're aligned, starting at the top, around what are they, what do they mean, and why are they important. We can recruit to them, we can coach to them, we can hold people accountable to them, and we can recognize and celebrate and develop with those in mind. So to me, the leaders starting there, and then having that mindset of, as a leader, and of course you can be a leader at any level, I am a culture carrier. You have to claim that title. And the word carrier is a very important phrasing, because to carry something means I got to pick it up every day.
Effort.
And I got to pick it up. And when you realize that that's part of what we do to bring our organizations alive and keep them competitive, now we realize that, yeah, we have our day job and our results and our numbers that we hit. And it's not one or the other. And we are all responsible to live out the core values of this organization so that we can achieve our strategic aims.
A lot of support for that commentary in the chat just now, but also a great quote from Jeffrey. It says, "We say if it hangs on the wall, it has to be lived out down the hall."
Oh, that's great.
I got some excitement going in the chat too. So yeah, I love that as well. And I think that I'm going to get us ready for Q&A in just one second. But Eric, I want to give you the last word on this one. Something that I haven't talked about a lot on the past episodes of the show, but this comes down to larger organizations. You mentioned working at Disney and at WIS International now, and do larger organizations, I don't know exactly how I've thought through the question. It would seem that there might be an advantage in some ways, but maybe a disadvantage in others. Like, how do you think about that relationship between a larger organization when it comes to leadership development?
Yeah, I might not be popular when I say this, but I'll tell you, I don't think they're at an advantage or a disadvantage, because I don't believe that at the core of leadership is it the company's responsibility. I truly believe it's my responsibility to determine if I want to lead or if I just want to manage. It's my responsibility if I want to lead and bring my team to success so that I can see a successful year, I can see a successful bottom line, I can see a successful raise, a successful 360 review, whatever it happens to be, it's my choice. And so I think organizations uniformly, whether they're big, small, 5-person organizations, 500,000-person organizations, they have that same advantage or disadvantage because it really comes down to the individual. And I think no matter how much money an organization spends, and there are lots of great programs out there, Predictive Index has been one of my favorite, and I'm not paid to say that, I really truly believe, because it's very easy to start, and then it really focuses on what do I need to do to change my behaviors to be a better authentic self, be a better leader. And I think if you really truly focus your time as an organization on teaching your folks and bringing your folks into leadership, the needle actually moves there. So it doesn't really matter where you're spending the money from that perspective. It's whether or not they adopt it. And again, it's culture. Heather is absolutely right. I live my WIS spirit values every single day. I exemplify my spirit values every single day. And it's no wonder I'm moving the needle when it comes to developing leaders, because that culture is there. But I have to make that choice. I have to choose to pick that up every morning. I have to choose, do I want to be a leader on this conference call today? Or do I want to be, for lack of a better term, a dictator, just tell people what to go do? I choose to be a leader every day, and I choose to learn and grow as a leader every day, even in my role today as a senior director.
I think it is great. It's absolutely refreshing. If I'm in a large organization to hear, like, I always have the power. I can take Joe's coaching around personal empowerment too. I can bring it into my leadership. I think that that's really, it's great to hear, because you'd hate to think that like there's an advantage or a disadvantage, which is nice. I'm going to shift us into my favorite part of the show, which is the audience Q&A. I'm going to remind everybody to use the Q&A button inside of Zoom. I can see we've got a lot of questions already piling up, so we're going to have some lightning round questions coming in. But while I'm waiting for those questions to come in too, a few more, I'm going to put up a quick Zoom poll if I can. And that's to mention that companies are using talent optimization to drive better business results through better people practices all the time. And so you can see a couple of questions on here. Are you interested in learning more about the PI platform and bringing talent optimization into your organization or to your clients? And then if you're already a partner, then you can go ahead and just let us know that too. And we'll connect you as best we can. And also, are you interested in hearing more about AceUp? Joe has given us such great information today about coaching, and AceUp is all about scalable coaching and bringing coaching to places that it just be honest with you, it just doesn't get to when it needs to otherwise. And AceUp is doing some amazing things when it comes to using technology and amazing coaches like Joe to really change that paradigm, which is fabulous to see. So let us know through your poll response there if you could, and we're going to move on to the questions. All right. All right, I'm just waiting for the questions to pop in. Let me just switch over here. Okay, I'm going to take this first question, which comes from Trip. How does leadership development vary based on different generations? I think, Heather, you might have mentioned that, different generations. How does leadership development vary and versus what they expect? And how do we provide a more blended solution to accelerate growth? Multi-generational leadership development. What do you think?
I think that's fabulous. I think the more senior generations in the workplace have tremendous wisdom to share. They have tremendous perspective that the younger generation in the workforce needs to hear and experience. So great opportunities for learning and mentorship there. I also think that the senior generations need to hear from the younger generation about, what they need and how to create a more inclusive and diverse work environment, and how we can show up and we can be empathetic without compromising results. So the cross-generational learning, it is so important. But having said that, it's very important you have a guide or a facilitator who can help those mixed learning environments understand one another. Tools like the behavioral assessment from Predictive Index can really help a mixed group like that see how we're all different, we communicate differently, and let's use those insights to find some common ground and understand one another so that we can learn from one another.
Yeah, and here's a pro tip for any PI users out there. I use Team Discovery, which is our team composite tool, and I color code based on generational cohorts. And boy, you
Very
want to
cool.
talk about conversations? Woo!
Yeah.
Joe, you got us with this APPLY acronym.
Oh,
Huge.
okay.
People wanted to see if you would spell that out again. What does APPLY
Spell
stand
that
for?
out again.
Yeah,
Okay.
please. Just give us the APPLY acronym.
Okay, very good. A stands for authentic self. And it's, of course, all about discovering more about your unique gifts and your values and expressing those, right? The first P is purpose. And I like to think of defining your greater purpose, not just your purpose in everyday work, but what is your greater purpose in everyday work as well as in life.
Nice.
P, of course, you heard me keep saying, repeating, practice, practice, practice. That's what the second P is all about. And really, we're practicing new ways of thinking, new ways of being, and new ways of behaving.
Yeah.
Right? And then as you practice, particularly in your workplace, as well as in your home place, right? You're going to learn. If you stay awake, you're going to learn because you're practicing new behaviors. So it's the lessons learned that you really want to capture. And capture those so that you're nurturing those into your why, which is your growth.
Your growth.
So this is a coaching model that I developed that is really all about leadership empowerment, as well as business and personal growth.
Okay, I like that very much. So here's the next question, which is, how would you answer the challenge of a leader to have his or her leaders or people remain productive all the while with the drive to inspire? So how do we balance the need to drive the business basically, but also inspire the people at the same time? Any good tips on that one?
Yeah, I work for an organization with international, and specifically the inventory side of our business is a very productivity heavy business, right? We've got to hit our productivity numbers, and a lot of folks grew up in that world of the more productive I am, the more successful I am. And as we start to think about efficiency a little bit differently, when we start to think about how to inspire leaders and grow leaders, it's understanding, it's really realizing that if I'm a happy employee, it sounds simple, simplistic, but if I'm a happy employee, I'm going to be a more productive employee. If I feel engaged into my core organization, if I'm engaged in my team, if I'm engaged in the work I do, I'm going to be naturally more productive. I'm going to want to learn more. I'm going to want to work harder. I'm going to want to skill up. If I'm disengaged, I'm going to just come in and quiet quit. I'm going to do the base of what I need to do. So where leaders really need to dig in here, in my personal opinion, is if you spend more time leading your team around all the aspects of their role, leading them to be better, grow their skills, etc., the whole team's going to get propped up, right? So if you spend time just focusing on how to be more productive every single day, you're only hitting that one piece. And at some point, people are going to start popping out. You're going to start have quiet quitting, or you're going to have true attrition happen because they're like, I'm not getting anything for myself. All they're worried about is their numbers. That's where that inspiration comes in from my perspective. I hope that answered the question for the person.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it sparked a comment I saw in the chat from Lindsay. Inspiring is driving business results. I don't understand how we continue to disconnect the two. So again, integration, and within talent optimization, we always say every business problem is a people problem. Like there's something going on with how we're leading our people if we're not getting the business results we want. So I also love the integration, Lindsay. So here's the next one, and I'm going to direct this one to, let's see here. Oh, soft skills. I'm going to direct this one to you, Heather. A lot of what y'all have talked about is generally considered soft skills. And I find that there's a generational gap, and these soft skills are not embraced by top agency or firm leaders, nor valued the same. So how do we encourage leaders to reevaluate the value of soft skills?
Well, I think if you're working in an organization where the senior team doesn't see people and culture as a competitive advantage, there is a challenge there. And I think the way that you start to chip away at that is with whatever your sphere of control is, lead in ways that create safety and where people feel cared about, and coach instead of, direct. Model those behaviors and make your own business case. Because just like Eric said, if you're leading in that way, or you have a small cadre of leaders who are leading in that way, you will see the needle move on the business metrics. And you're always going to have, I see the comment there, why should I thank or recognize people for doing their job? You can worry about changing those mindsets, or you can prove out what we're all talking about here, which is, if I create a healthy work environment on my team, the best and brightest people are going to want to be on my team, and they'll stay on my team. And if I coach and care about them and create trust and shared purpose on the regular, the results will be there. And then when people start saying, wow, what's going on Heather's team? You can say, well, here's what's working. So I think sometimes we think I've got to intellectually persuade people to see it my way. Yes, and you could just simply approach things a different way and see the results come through.
Can I
like
add
it.
on to Heather, particularly because of a real life type coaching situation where I was working with a very, very senior marketing director in the banking environment. His goals was to get his people engaged, because after all, we're doing engagement surveys. So I want to know that they're engaged, and I want greater outcomes. So we tooled up, of course, and he was very, very strategically savvy, But what he wasn't doing was engaging them actively in the retreats and the offsites and all that good stuff. So he started to do that, did that very well. And lo and behold, his KPIs, they were there. His critical success factors, they were there. Oh, wow, this is good. He was talking to another colleague, and the colleague said, but I don't feel any vibes or any energy from the people. And he said, Joe, really, we met our goals and we even did better in some areas, but we really didn't inspire the ownership of what they had really developed and put together and implemented. So where's the silver bullet? And of course, we all know the answers. The silver bullet is really empowering them
Mhm.
to
Right.
own and to move forward. He engaged them, but he didn't empower them and inspire them for the kind of energy that he really was looking for. But they couldn't express it either on the front end.
Yeah.
I think it's really a redefinition of what success actually is today and tomorrow, holistically, the whole employee's experience as well as their performance. It's just things are it's so tightly intertwined. To pretend like we can get one without the other is absolute folly. So,
Mhm.
Joe, I'm going to let you have the last word on that one. Thank you so much. If we can put the slides back up, I want to make sure that our audience knows how to get in touch with you panelists after the show in case they'd like to do that. There's going to be contact information that goes out as well, where you can follow up on LinkedIn and email and fun stuff like that. And we're also going to be talking about the next show, which is going to be the March, I believe it's March 8th at 2 p.m. Yes, there it is. It's called The Big Bang, which is how to navigate disruptive changes in your organization and your work life. We know there's a lot of large companies, especially in the tech sector, that seem to be having a lot of layoffs. There's a lot of disruption. There's changes in business model. Things can come along and really be a big change that affects your work. So you're going to want to tune in a month from now and hear what our panelists at that time have to say about the Big Bang. So thanks so much, as always, for your time and your attention today. Really appreciate your continued support of Perspectives. Thank you mostly to our wonderful panelists, Joe, Heather, Eric. Thanks so much for sharing your expertise. I know the team has gotten a great amount of value out of this. The chat was absolutely blowing up, and I look forward to sharing the materials out with the audience. And thanks again, and everybody enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Wow.
Bye.
Yep. Bye-bye.